Hi everyone, my name is Tashi Jackson, and today I'll be sharing my capstone project, Bridging Green Career Pathways, Barriers, Belonging, and Workforce Equity for Immigrant and Refugee Youth in South King County. To begin, let me provide some background context. So, with the growing transition to a low carbon economy, there has been a rising need for thousands of green jobs, and it's been found that immigrants already make up 23% of green job workers in the US. However, the problem at the center of my project is this: access within the environmental sector isn't equal. Many immigrant and refugee youth face language barriers, underemployment, and financial pressure to take what we call survival jobs. These are positions that pay now but offer no real career path. And so, having discovered this early on, my research question became, how do we make green jobs more accessible and culturally sensitive for immigrant and refugee youth? I chose to focus on youth for two reasons. First, that was the age group I worked with during my internship. And two, I believe this is a critically important group because they are our future workforce and community leaders. All right, now moving into my internship and methods, I interned at Partner in Employment, or PI for short, in SeaTac, Washington. PI is a really wonderful nonprofit focused on economic mobility and immigrant and refugee community, or for immigrant and refugee communities within South King County. During winter quarter, my work had two parts. So first, there was direct support, which involved helping with the youth restoration crew, facilitating creative art activities, as well as attending community events like the one shown in Figure 1. And then there was research, which involved compiling a green employer directory of 55 plus organizations, distributing a survey to employers, collecting observational data, conversing with staff, and synthesizing findings from over 15 sources. So all of this formed the foundation of my results. So now let me quickly summarize the four main findings. So to understand how to make green jobs more accessible, I started by looking at what actually engages young people. So first, I found that hands-on place-based learning appears to increase engagement. I observed that during classroom lectures, students seemed quite distracted. But once they got outside and started doing restoration work, it completely flipped and they were a lot more engaged. And this tells us that how we teach green skills matters just as much as what we teach. It's also worth noting that PI staff have validated this as well and also explicitly noted improvements in mental and physical health, as well as a stronger connection to local parks. So that's one piece, engagement. But engagement doesn't matter if the jobs themselves are out of reach. So this brings me to my second finding, which is that I discovered a structural problem. Many green jobs are unpaid. In the process of creating my employer directory, I found that environmental organizations rely heavily on volunteers, but unpaid work directly excludes the youth I work with, young people who need stipends for stability. And then onto the third finding, which I gathered from employers in my survey. According to the survey, language is the number one barrier, and this is reinforced by broader research as well. This is not because workers lack skills necessarily, but because employers lack bilingual capacity. If you take a look at Figure 2, I asked employers to rank the top barriers to green jobs, and as I just said, language was the most frequently cited as the number one barrier. Moreover, out of 12 employers surveyed in a separate question, only one reported providing translated materials or interpretation support. So this reveals a gap. And then one more thing I learned was from talking to staff. And what they said was that participants sometimes return to PI because the standard workforce doesn't feel welcoming. And alumni say typical job applications and workplace cultures feel unfamiliar compared to PI's all BIPOC crew with shared lived experience. And as one staff member told me, that camaraderie is a very specific feeling, and that can't easily be replicated everywhere. So, with all of this in mind, I'm proposing four concrete actions. One, invest in bilingual capacity. As PI staff member Emmeline Castillo said, if green jobs wanted to be more accessible, they would hire crew leads that speak the languages of a variety of BIPOC communities. Two, create paid entry-level positions. Otherwise, unpaid volunteering locks out youth who need financial stability. And three, build sustained partnerships. Refugee and immigrant youth need employers who know them, and that trust takes time. And then four, follow Pi's lead and other culturally sensitive spaces in cultivating belonging within the wider green economy. And this is all summarized in Figure 3, which shows these 4 pathways from research to practice. Now on to the last section. What do these implications mean for each group specifically? Well, for employers, it means investing in bilingual capacity, like I said, translating materials and hiring bilingual staff, as well as building sustained partnerships with programs like PI. And then for PI and similar programs, perhaps there should be a continued endeavor to measure belonging and confidence alongside job placement, and then using that data to advocate for funding and refining culturally sensitive practices. And lastly, for policymakers, consider how workforce development funding can prioritize paid entry-level green roles and language access. All right, now finally, I want to say a huge thank you to my site supervisor, Clara Gawa, my faculty advisor, Tim Billow, and the entire PI team, especially Emmeline Castillo and Alhama Wazaida from the Youth Restoration crew. And to my co-intern Lauren and my Capstone cohort, this work could not have been possible without all of you supporting me. To close, if you're going to take anything away from this, it's that green jobs are growing, but growth alone isn't enough. If we want a just transition, we have to design pathways that are paid, linguistically accessible, and culturally welcoming. Thank you all for listening.